All right, welcome to this episode of the Elevating IT podcast, recorded live on Facebook and on YouTube. We record every Friday at 2 p.m. I'm here with Frank DeBenedetto, the founder of audIT. Hey, Frank.
Good afternoon, Mike. Thanks for having me. And, if it wasn't crazy times, I would pretend that I've been at my desk all day waiting for Facebook Live, but you just got me out of my swimming pool. So here I am. Yeah, I was getting a little sun. Figured why ruin a nice sunny Friday in New Jersey. So here I am, Mike.
Oh, my God.
Happy to
Well,
be
if I knew you were in the pool, I would have had you. I would have given you more work to do. Well, appreciate you being here, and I appreciate everybody who's listening either live or on the recording, whether you're watching this on Facebook or YouTube. And again, you can go to iTunes. You can make sure you subscribe to our podcast on iTunes. It's called the Elevating IT Podcast, or go to elevatingit.net. And you can check it out there, or of course on the audIT blog. And if you're on live, pop a question in. We'll answer questions on the show. If you have them, just pop it in the comments box. And today we're going to talk about really simple. What's at stake when MSPs are not good at selling? Because we know, Frank, simply there's obvious things, right? Like you're not going to make the money you want to make, or you're going to lose deals. But what more than that?
Yeah. So I think this goes back to the fact that a lot of the vendors in our space are channel only. So let me define that for you, if you're, just in case you're not completely familiar with what that means. I'm not going to mention any vendors, but there's a handful that sell direct, which means that not only can we as MSPs sell this to the end customer, but the end customer could also Google the product. And it happens every once in a while. And it's frustrating for MSPs when you tell them what to buy and you're using your intellectual capital to craft a solution, and then they Google it and go on Amazon, and maybe they're able to buy it for a couple bucks cheaper. So it's frustrating. But in that scenario, as frustrating as it is for the MSP, at least the customer gets the product, right? So let's just keep it simple. We talked maybe about a firewall. If I do all the research and say, hey, this is the make and model that you need, and the prospect says thanks and goes on to the internet and buys it directly, at least they get that product. And the manufacturer, the vendor's happy. They moved a unit. We could argue that it may not be set up properly, or the MSP would do a better job, and that's definitely true. But the product gets moved, and the end customer gets it in their hands. However, MSPs don't really love those types of vendors. We deal with them from time to time. It's a necessary evil. Well, we love our channel only. So there's a whole bunch of those. The better vendors, I think, in our space are channel only. Some really good ones out there. And they don't sell to the end customer. They only sell through the MSP. So if you think about that supply chain, the end customer will never get that product or service that they, in many cases, so desperately need if the MSP is not effective in selling. Think about that, right? And unfortunately for a lot of MSPs, especially early in the game, and I'll consider myself at one time was part of this crowd, was how we end up making that sale and getting that end customer what they need? We lower our price. So it's a race to the bottom. And many times, we as the MSP take the hit because our ineffectiveness to sell as a desire to get them that end product. Now, if we don't lower our price and we're not good at selling, or really what it comes down to, I think, is educating the buyer and allowing them to make a good, educated buying decision and feel good about the value, then they won't buy at all. And they may never get that product. And I think, as a vendor that sells products in this industry as channel only, that probably has to be one of the vendor's most frustrating concepts here, or problems, is that if the MSP doesn't move their product, the ultimate consumer of it never gets it, right?
Right.
So I think that's what's at stake at the end of the day. And as an MSP, I think I have an obligation to try to do the best job that I can to these prospects and even my clients, right? If we're talking about maybe upselling or cross-selling, I owe them there's an obligation, and they need us now more than ever. So we really need to, as MSPs, figure out a better way to communicate to them, not confuse them, and allow them to buy from us and get those products and services into their hands. And I really view it as a triple win. If you think about it, if you're a channel only vendor, you win because a product or a service got sold. If you're the MSP, you win because you're making money and you made a sale of a product or service. And the consumer wins because they're getting something that they need, whether it's to protect them, backup, or security, or something that provides business continuity, which is, a little bit, needed now more than ever. Those things all get into the right hands. And so it's a triple win all the way down the line. And, again, if the middle part of that breaks down, because it's linear, if it's channel only, the middle part breaks down, the vendor never makes the sale. The MSP certainly doesn't make the sale because that's where the breakdown is. And the end consumer suffers. They don't get the right things. And I think that for a lot of companies, a lot of SMBs out there, they don't know what they don't know until there's a crisis at hand, right? So many times you figure out what doesn't work when there is ransomware. That's when you figured out the backup didn't work, right? Right. You figure out that your strategy for business continuity doesn't work when you don't have any electricity. I've had prospects tell me, well, we have a generator now, so we don't need your solution, the cloud solution, because we have a generator. Well, what happens when the governor says you can't go to your office anymore, right? Now it doesn't matter, you had the generator. And now, so you continue to figure out areas of failure. And I came from the insurance world, right? So when I cut my teeth out of college, I did IT in the insurance financial services sector. So I really got to learn the insurance world. And I remember distinctly listening to a sales presentation from one of the agents, not to me, but I was in the room and they were presenting to some others. And they said, you can't afford to sell them less than what they need. And it has to work in every scenario, right? They said, otherwise, it's like me selling you a life insurance policy and it doesn't cover you on the third Thursday of every month. So just don't die on the third Thursday. You'll be fine, right? Like you don't have control over that. And so you need to put solutions in place that work, hopefully, in every scenario. And I think for a lot of SMBs, they figure out what didn't work at the time where they need it most. And so therein lies a good opportunity for a lot of MSPs. I think coming out of this little COVID-19 spike, that we've had, or period of time, and we're sort of still in it. But a lot of MSPs are reporting prospects calling them and saying, we need your help because what we're doing hasn't worked. And some don't have an MSP and they're coming to the realization that they should have one, and others have MSPs who didn't do a good job for them. But again, selling is pretty important because that's how things get moved along. And I know you always say people would rather buy than sell, and I agree with that. I think if you do the right sales presentation, you'll give them permission to buy from you, and they will, and they'll feel good and confident about it. And hopefully, in time of crisis, you'll get some emails that say, "Hey, thank God you guys sold us X, Y, and Z because it's really helped us right now, and we're very grateful for it."
Right. Yeah. The biggest loser is really the small business, because you're going to move on as an MSP and kind of go, okay, I missed that sale. I'll just go get another sale. The vendor doesn't care. The vendor's just going out and getting more MSPs and they're going to make their money. But the small business doesn't get what they need because they didn't get the service or they didn't get the product they need. They find out when it's too late.
Yep. I've always thought to myself, we don't close every deal, of course. And sometimes if the prospect says no to us, and we walk away and say, okay, maybe we'll get you later. But I always think to myself, look, I'm not going to go out of business as an MSP because that one prospect said no to me.
Right.
But they could go out of business if they said no to me. If they don't do anything and they don't, let's say they got ransomware, 2 weeks later because they were still unprotected, they could go out of business, right? There's a much greater risk to that SMB than there is, to the MSP, and then certainly to the vendor. Like you said, it kind of moves up line and it's on a grander scale. So any one little sale doesn't necessarily move the needle as much, but you get down to the bottom, the lowest common denominator, which is that small business. And yeah, it could be business ending.
Devastating. And that's, you know, I'd be remiss not to mention that this is the whole reason why this podcast is called Elevating IT. Yeah, that was the philosophy that you came with audit. What you wanted for audit was really to elevate the quality of IT available to businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. I was always disappointed at my industry that we would get called in and I would look around and somebody would say, yeah, we have an MSP, and we would go in and the place would be a disaster. There's a couple, forums on Facebook that we subscribe to, and I often see people post pictures like before and after of the racks and stuff. And I always think that's pretty cool because I have that that OCD thing. Like I love to see it all nice and neat. But the before is amazing. And, you know, one of the things I used to always say to a prospect is say, actually, well, let me back up. I remember you asked me one time, you said, what's the one thing you could look for that would be like a telltale sign of the state of IT? And I remember at first I was like, how could I tell you one thing? And you pressed me. And I remember I said, you know, if you go into that IT wiring closet, everybody has that like closet and they roll their eyes. They're afraid to show you and they go, oh, it's a mess in here, right? And you go in and it's usually a mess. And I always think to myself, you know, does the prospect understand that if this is what they can see,
exactly,
imagine what they can't see? Like, did the MSP just not get around to cleaning up everything else? But everything else is like aces, right? So, you know, unfortunately, that's what we would find. And I'd be disappointed. I say, how could another MSP, one of my brothers in this industry, right? How could they leave it like this? It's not because there's not good products available. And really, after, you know, I really dug into it, it's a failure in selling. They were unsuccessful at selling the proper solutions, cleaning things up, getting them, you know, making it right, you know, doing it the right way. You can't leave things like that. It's derelict of you to do that. And so you and I talked, and I said, listen, I think if MSPs had an easier way to sell, they would get the right products and services into the hands of these SMBs, and the quality of their IT would ultimately be elevated just naturally because they're able to confidently buy the right, you know, products and services. And so you're right. And I guess that's how we got the name of the podcast, was sort of a spinoff of it.
Well, right? Yeah. Oh, exactly. You know, the idea here is that we want to help these guys sell the right solution to the business that needs it. And this happens in every industry. It's not just IT. I mean, I had a digital marketing agency for a long time. I did SEO services, and it was the same kind of thing. You could easily go in, run a couple of quick diagnostic things, or do a little bit of analysis and a little digging, and you'd see that they were being underserved by the company that they hired. And then you would find, well, they're only paying the company that they've hired this company for SEO, and they're paying $250 a month. And that's maybe like 10% of what they should be spending.
Right.
You know, a lawyer, I used to work with a lot of lawyers on paid ads, and, you know, it costs $50 a click to get one click, right? Like it would cost $50 a click, and they need X amount of clicks to get to a phone call. They'd have to spend like $2,500 a month in ad spend alone to be able to get it. Now, it makes sense for them to do that because the sale is the money, you know, the money they're going to bring in from that justifies it. But then they go out and they can't, you know, the provider can't persuade them to spend that kind of money. So what do they end up with? They end up with spending $250, $500 a month, and it's throwing it out the window.
Right.
It's doing nothing.
Yep.
So same kind of
sometimes I think people know what they're paying, and they're getting what they're paying for, and they're okay with that. You know, there are times where people say, listen, I'm fine, you know, paying less, and I accept that it's a lesser, you know, quality or, you know, lesser entity, and that's fine. But I think IT is the type of thing that it's pretty complex, right? And most of the end users don't know what they don't know. So they're spending a certain amount, and no one's ever told them you should spend more. They're afraid to say, or maybe they said no to them and they never brought it up ever again. And, you know, it's what I like to do when I go in there. I always tell the prospect, I say, listen, before I would even begin to, you know, pitch a solution to you or try to sell you something, it's important for me to understand what you have, but more important for you to understand what you have. I really want you to grasp where you're at. And it allows us to come to one of two conclusions, right? It's typically either yes, you're getting what you're paying for, and you're just not spending enough, which is what you're saying.
Right.
And in some cases, people are spending plenty, they're just not getting what they're paying for then. And that angers them, right? And either way, those two scenarios typically are highly likely to lead to a change in their IT provider as opposed to staying. There is a third scenario. I mean, we do every once in a while go in and somebody says, I just need want a third party opinion. And we come in and we'll say, listen, this place looks great and I would love your business. Here's a couple little minor things that you could take back to your current MSP and have them, talk to you about that and resolve a couple things, but I don't think you should change. And I've told prospects that. I had one that said, we really want to work with you. And I said, I'd love to have your business, but I actually knew the MSP and I said, I don't think it makes sense to change. And they said, okay, we respect that. And, I said, look, if something changes in the future, we're here for you. But it's another scenario. I mean, this isn't all doom and gloom. There's a lot of good MSPs out there that can sell properly and they're doing a great job. We're just kind of talking about like, what's the risk if you're not in that category or you're just trying to figure it out. The risk of you trying to figure it out too puts a lot of your prospects at risk, right?
Yep.
Every time you don't get a prospect to say yes to you and they don't get these products and services that they need, they're at risk. You lost the sale, but they're at more risk than you are, right?
Yep. And, perfect segue here into to talking a little bit about audit, because audit solves that problem for folks. Audit, our users, the folks who are using audit to sell are getting around price objections because that's what audit does. It's simple, emotional, it pulls them in and it gets around those makes it easy for them to understand. So here's what I want to do. All right. Okay. First of all, I want to give a quick plug before we wrap up and make sure people know it's June 12th today, right? So you still have time to sign up for a couple of events. We've been pushing them. They're coming up. Next week is Techcation, summer camp for MSPs, put on by Lion Guard, and there's 10 sponsors. Audit is one of the sponsors. We're going to be presenting on Tuesday at 4:30. We're the last presenter. I like to say we're the closing act of the day. Everybody else is opening for us. So Techcation is going to be a lot of fun. And then following that is MVP Growth Fest. And that's put on by ID Agent. That's going to be awesome. It's like a one-day event. It's going to be panel discussions. And Frank, you're going to be speaking on one of the panels. There's 4 panels. So it's going to be quick and sweet. Where Techcation's
Magic Johnson's going to be speaking. I think Matt's going to be interviewing Magic Johnson. So that'll be pretty cool.
Well, that's important, man. You got to be there for that. I mean, if you don't do anything, you got to do that. Just to, I mean, you listen to everything. You're going to learn something from everything. But if you're not tuning in to listen to Magic Johnson, Matt Solomon's going to be playing one-on-one, and Magic Johnson's going to dunk over him. It's going to be hilarious. No, I'm just kidding. Matt's going to be interviewing him. I think Kevin Lancaster is going to do a Q&A with him as well. That guy is a business mogul. Magic Johnson's a brilliant man when it comes to business, and you have something to learn from him. So you should definitely tune in for that. But here's the deal. For Techcation, I need to put together a little 1 to 2 minute promo about what audit does. I'm coming back to my segue because we need to tell our listeners here on the podcast, listening live, about audit. We're going to give a little promo for audit because we sponsor the Elevating IT podcast. So I think you, Frank, there's nobody better to explain what audit is and what audit does, because you're the founder of audit and you're an MSP and you're using it every day. And I need to get you out of here by 2:30 because you're a working MSP who has to go to an appointment. So tell us about audit, Frank.
You got it, Mike. So most MSPs have a hard time presenting without confusing their clients and prospects, resulting in lost sales, less MRR, and lower profitability. Audit sales presentation system makes it a snap to create simple and engaging sales presentations that practically close the deals for you. At Audit, we know that you want to be a successful and profitable MSP. In order to do that, you need a fast way to create a sales presentation or business review that engages the prospect or client and converts. The problem is that it's too difficult and time-consuming to put together a simple, non-technical presentation, which makes you feel frustrated, overwhelmed, and ultimately rejected. We understand the frustration because we are also an MSP, which is why we have helped hundreds of other MSPs achieve closing rates of 50% and more. Start your 15-day free trial today, and in the meantime, download the full 28-page sample audit report and see exactly what your presentations will look like. Stop losing deals based on price and instead grow your MRR, drive profitability, and crush your competition.
Couldn't have said it better myself, Frank. Thank you so much for being here today. And thank you, everybody listening and watching on Facebook and on YouTube and listening on iTunes and all the places. I mean, there's so many places that this is now. It's like I got to write it down so I remember. So come back next week for the Elevating IT podcast live. We record it live every Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Come ask questions and hang out with me and Frank. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Enjoy the weekend.